Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. How you doing? We haven't started yet. How you doing, Miss Blue Noble?
No, because we knew you were coming.
Oh, okay. So we got some seats here. How you all doing today?
Good.
Blue Noble? At least it's getting a little cooler now.
Right?
Yeah, it's more comfortable right now.
Okay, so we kind of came early.
We are our political action committee. We were formed because we wanted to make sure that our neighborhood developed the way we wanted it to develop. And so we actually support candidates for city council. Our focus is the city. We don't deal with state or the feds or any of that. Our focus is Anaheim. And so now that we have districts, it's going to be a little bit different than it has been before. But that's okay. We're still going to be doing our thing and working for our neighborhood to make it better. Tonight we have two presenters. The first one we have is Officer Conklin, and he's from the Anaheim Police Department Homeless Outreach Team, and he's going to give us an update. We had a meeting about a year ago, same kind of meeting at Lou and Michelle's, and so we figured, enough time's gone by that they can give us an update on how they're doing things, and I'm sure they're just tweaking their processes and let us know how things are going, and you guys can ask questions if you have any questions for them, because they work right here in our neighborhood, plus other areas of Anaheim as well. The other presenter is going to be Larry Pasco from Community Services, and he's going to talk about the homeless shelter that we're going to have built here in Anaheim over at Kramer Place. So, and after Officer Conklin finishes, then he can start. Okay, so without further ado, please, Officer Conklin, if you'll come on up.
Give me 5 minutes. I'll turn that on. Good evening. I'm Bob Conklin with the Police Department's Homeless Outreach Team. Sergeant Mike Lozo and I started the unit coming up on 3 years ago, and we haven't left. The reason for that is there has been so much progress in how we manage the public safety issues related within the homeless population, as well as reducing the homeless population in the city. There are a lot of components to this, and the last thing I want to do is just lecture to you. So I want your questions, I want your comments, good or bad. This is the forum to do it. I have pretty thick skin, so if you yell at me, it's okay. So the Homeless Outreach Team is part of the Anaheim Homeless Collaborative. There are a bunch of organizations involved. The lead organization is CityNet. CityNet is unique in that its basic platform is trying to organize all the faith-based groups, the churches and so forth, in their efforts to help the homeless population. That has morphed into a partnership amongst dozens of organizations throughout the city and the county toward this effort. One of the things I learned early on, and it's a sentiment that we try to convey to our other officers, is that homelessness can happen to anybody at any time for any reason. If I upset my wife and I do something dumb at work and I lose my job, I sever ties with my family for whatever reason, I start dabbling with drugs or alcohol, like that. I'm on the street. So that's the sentiment that we try to relay to all our officers. But being police officers, our primary function is law enforcement. We have to protect the public, protect property, and so forth. So what we've learned to do is couple law enforcement with outreach. Your first name is? Sonia. My wife's name. Sonia. Say Sonia is staying in, is this George Washington Park?
Yes.
George Washington Park. She sleeps in the gazebo every night. She drinks until she passes out.
Sounds about right.
Right. We all know Sonia. Let's check your purse now. So our job is to first deal with the legal issues. If she has any warrants that she needs to take care of, any drinking violations, these kinds of things. Again, we need to maintain the quality of living that we all expect. And that means that Sonia doesn't pass out in the park's gazebo. However, once law enforcement is over, we want to sit Sonia down and learn about it. We want to figure out what is keeping her homeless. What are the challenges she faces? Alcohol, drugs. Is there a family support structure somewhere in the country, sometimes outside of the country, that we can reconnect her to help her get on some improved path? And that's really the real basic premise of the homeless outreach team, is to balance those two things, the law enforcement and the outreach. There's just so much going on. I don't know where to go from there. I know Larry Pascoe is going to talk about the homeless shelter. It's not really a shelter. It's going to be a multi-resource center. I know that we all have concerns about it. However, the city of Anaheim does a very good job of researching these things before they're implemented. Now, mind you, the resource center is on the shoulders of the county to organize and implement and manage. However, Anaheim stood up and said, we'll provide the location. There are other multi-resource centers around the country. We have visited one of them up in Santa Maria, a few hours from here. And they work. The problem with homelessness is, Samantha. Samantha's addicted to heroin. She agrees one day to go into detox. Well, I can get Samantha into detox. And she goes through a couple weeks in the program. Then what? That's all they do. They detox you and they let you go. She's back on the street. Because the transitional living centers have waiting lists and are so far and few between that she has nowhere to go, and she ultimately falls back into the drug use. These resource centers afford these folks the opportunity to progress and graduate through baby steps without leaving the site. So Samantha detoxes, she's good, she gets up, she walks out of the building 20 feet over, she steps into like an emergency shelter type thing, like an armory. She's there for a period of time, she's doing well. Again, she meets those milestones that are expected of the center, and then they move her over into like a transitional living building 20 feet away. She does well there, progresses again, meeting certain milestones, and ultimately moves into her own little apartment in the permanent supportive housing that they have there on site. And really, you look at this place, it looks like a college campus. You would never know that it houses 200 plus homeless folks on any given day. But we're cops, so we're concerned about the public safety aspect of having something like that in our city. So we met with the chief of police of Santa Maria and his second in command, and we sat them down and asked them what their opinion was. They hadn't received any calls for service from the facility since its inception several years ago. The only call for service they did get was from a lady suffering from mental illness who reported some crime that was unfounded. The previous, what was this title, community preservation guy, Terry Lowe? Yes. Terry Lowe traveled around the country and visited a couple other multi-resource centers and found that they work. The important component is that they're managed well. If they're managed like they are in San Diego, where, from what I understand, was the plan to develop what they have down there wasn't thought through, and there wasn't a very good law enforcement component to it. So it didn't thrive. It turned into just a place for them to shower and sleep, and that's really all it went into. But what we have here is law enforcement is going to have a substantial seat at the table with the county as far as its conception. The county has to go over a bunch of hurdles before it opens up. I don't know where they are with that now. Larry might be able to answer the question. But what it does is it gives us an option, because right now there's a big gap in street-level homelessness and that permanent supportive housing. Right now, our only option is if there are no places available for transitional living, because they're filled, and it takes time for people to get back on their feet. Our only option is really to put these folks in motels. They're not Hiltons. They're like on the west end of the city, and we're forking over about $400 a week to keep these families and individuals in motels. We can only do that for so long before the funds run out. Usually that's well before the permanent supportive spot opens up for them. So CityNet is engaging with the churches. Maybe we can do like a church sponsorship type thing. These infomercials you see at 2 a.m. with kids in other countries, and maybe we can put Polaroids of them, or send them T-shirts. I don't know, but maybe we can get the churches, faith-based groups to come out and help us with that, to sponsor, adopt homeless people and families, and help them that way until they can get those spots. One of the mindsets that we had to change for our team was, it doesn't matter what your history is. It doesn't matter that you use drugs or drink alcohol, if you're on probation or parole. It doesn't matter. Your situation is not going to improve if you're living on the street. So we've had to not ignore, but minimize those character flaws in people to get them off the street. Fortunately, HUD Housing, they used to have the same perspective where let's improve the person before we house them. Now they've done a 180 and they've said, well, let's house them first, and then we can work on whatever demons they're battling. So that's pretty much the mindset that we take. However, because we're the police, one of the things we teach our officers is, again, law enforcement comes first. We have to deal with the legal issues. So it doesn't matter if you're homeless, it doesn't matter if you're suffering from mental illness. If you break the law, there will be enforcement action. However, once the enforcement is over, we turn the page and we sit down with you and we try to engage, figure it out. We even have some of our jailers. So recently, a few months ago, the police department gave us an additional officer. So now our team is composed of 2 officers and a sergeant to handle all the homelessness in the entire city. We hand that outreach baton over to the collaborative, and the collaborative picks the ball up from there, and that affords us time to concentrate on the law enforcement stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Tell them a success story, like Tim. Tell them about Tim.
Which one's Tim?
The Birdman.
Yeah. All right.
He's so great.
Look, some of these stories, I'm supposed to be a cop and Ronnie and everything, but some of these stories actually do have an effect on us individually because they're success stories. Timothy, for lack of a better word, was a pain in our ass. Timothy would go down to Disneyland with his parrot and solicit money from people to take pictures with the bird. The bird's name was Maggie. The biggest darn parrot I've ever seen in my life. I mean, this thing, from head to tail, is this tall. But he loved this bird. So it took a couple years of tickets and arrests and warrants and court appearances for Timothy to finally get frustrated with us. He threw his hands up, still holding onto the bird, and said, "Okay, I'm done." It even got to the point where he had some medical issues, where he almost died. In fact, he was stabbed on my Disney. He was attacked at one point, and he survived. At that point, I told him, "Look, I'm done with the enforcement. We need to get you off the street. I can't do it anymore." And CityNet helped us out. CityNet did all the applications. They got his paperwork together. But the issue was the bird. There aren't any transitional living centers or permanent housing that will take a bird. So CityNet creatively somehow found a way to classified the bird as a what?
Service animal.
A service
animal.
a service
animal.
bird. I don't know how you do that. A service bird, and they got him. So he's now in his own apartment in Stanton, and he's
loves it.
loving life. And I haven't had contact with him in a while. That's probably a good thing. But I know he's very appreciative of all the effort. Another gentleman was Michael Smith, again, the nickname of Turbo. Mr. Smith had an accident several years back. I think he was an electrician or something.
Yeah.
He never really shared with us too much.
He got burned and he got old.
Yeah,
his eye was
his
messed
face
up.
is burned. I think he's missing an eye.
Yeah.
One of his hands is burnt over. So you run into this gentleman and you're kind of taken aback by his appearance. But he never really hurt anybody. He sat in La Palma Park all day with his little bottle of whatever he was drinking, and he read books all day. Intelligent guy. Funny when he wasn't too intoxicated. But it took a lot of enforcement to get him to cooperate with us. But he now has his own apartment down in the west end of Anaheim. He missed his friend a little bit, so he somehow found his way from the west end of Anaheim back to La Palma Park a couple times. We had to call a cab. We had to make sure it was nighttime so the cabbie wasn't fearful of his appearance. And we paid for the cab to send him back. That happened twice, and since then he's stayed. But those two gentlemen alone were the source of dozens of calls to the police department over the years. And just by getting them out the street, it was very successful. If we have 10 homeless people in George Washington Park and we can just get one of them off the street, that's 10% of our calls that are eliminated, and 10% of whatever concerns you guys might have. So again, we can enforce all day long, but it's really only a band-aid for getting them off the street. So the problem is, and you can attest to this, I'm sure, is it takes time to work with one individual. We're taking somebody at the low point in their life, and we're trying to build them up to where they can be self-sustained and live on their own. And they're gonna get up and fall several times, and it takes years sometimes. But we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions because I know you've been put on the spot. Taking care of the homeless situation, the mental situation. That you as a law enforcement, that's what you have been trained to do. But have you had any training on how to handle the mentally ill in regards to how to approach them, or because I know that's a different kind of training that you have to have.
The members of the homeless outreach team, two components. You have the homeless liaison officers. It's my partner and I, Sergeant Lozo. Well, he oversees the whole thing. And then you have the psychiatric emergency response team, two more officers partnered with an Orange County mental health clinician. The PERT team is more trained than anybody in the department on how to deal with folks suffering from mental illness. We also receive, probably half the training they do. But really, it comes down to a quote from a John Wayne movie. I don't know what it is. When you're dealing with someone with mental health, talk low, talk slow, don't talk too much. And really, that's kind of how we train our army. You gotta just wait a second and try to communicate with these folks. They could be trying to tell you something, but because of the dozen voices in their head, they just can't sort it out.
Her stuff's been taken. At times, her diabetic medicine's been taken. You guys go through it before?
Well, like I said, cancer is 60 years back on the amount of life that we've seen. But there's still a handful of folks like Patsy and a couple of folks that just amass a large amount of stuff. And that has to be dealt with.
Code enforcement is still confiscating a lot of their stuff out there.
Well, code enforcement picks stuff up at our direction.
Yeah.
But if it's somebody that's arrested, then you have an officer overseeing that property collection, and they usually do a very good job of sifting through this stuff. Code enforcement, we have a very good partnership with them. They go out and collect shopping carts and so forth whenever this property's out there. Thank God, because in a day like this, I don't want to have to be picking up all that stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. So the homeless shelter, I've heard is going to be so there'll be multiple agencies sort of at the same place available to what, help out. And did I hear that correctly?
Right. It's a place for them to get help. It's not a place for folks to just show up. The equivalent is, I guess, having an appointment. You got to be willing to get off the street, and you got to be willing to jump through some hoops, with the ultimate goal being to get off the street. It's not a place to just hang out and live the rest of your life. There's no expectation that you'll be there for too long of a period. We want these folks to get back on their feet. But yes, they will have county resources, city resources there for them to access while they're there. DMV, these kinds of things, get their IDs, and so forth.
So, are we supposed to be doing the homeless court, or are we doing that, or not doing that, or?
Well, right. So one of the challenges for the homeless folks up in North County was if they get a ticket or they get arrested and they have a court date, getting down to Santa Ana was a hardship. So we have an agreement with the homeless court to come to Anaheim every other month. It's right at a church, a couple blocks from the police station. We'll provide bus passes. We'll pick them up in our police cars and drive them to court if need be. But homeless court is the same type of thing, where they provide resources in lieu of consequences for their tickets. And they have to be minor infractions or nonviolent misdemeanors, and the courts will work with them. If they follow through with the help and the resources, then the courts minimize or we'll just get rid of the tickets or the arrests altogether. But again, it's a two-way street. We need the partnership with them to meet us halfway with the outreach. We can't do it for them.
Last question. Across from the Palma Park where the Connex boxes are and
the purpose of the check-in center was, again, one reason for it was to address the blight and the abundance of property in the parks. At the time, La Palma Park was a hub for everything, and providing the storage space did help significantly. On a regular basis, Mr. Noble can attest to this, that on a regular basis, their comics boxes are full. So you have to imagine if without the check-in center, all that property would otherwise be in the park. And so it has had an impact that way. And they're also porta potties, so they can use the porta potties instead of using public space. The other reason for the check-in center was a legal one. In order to enforce for some of these violations, the courts have said that the city has to allow them some mechanism to do the things that we're issuing them tickets for. So, for example, urinating in public. If I cite them for urinating in public, they're homeless. It's an involuntary need. The rumor is that the check-in center facility will be moved over there.
And the check-in is not open all the time. It's only open morning till 8 and then opens at 4:30.
Right. It's a couple hours in the morning.
RVs are not going to be allowed.
Right. So, keep in mind the homeless issue and the RV issue is countywide. It's all over the place. Even places you wouldn't think. So, as far as the RVs go, there's a 72-hour parking law, which is very difficult to enforce. We mark the tires. 72 hours ranging from that. we have a cot, there's nothing in that.
I'm going to stand. I'll be fine.
Right now, the only tool at the disposal of the police department is a mental health hold. We have to establish that the person is dangerous themselves, danger others, or they can't take care of themselves. Then we can place a hold on them and take them to a hospital. It's up to a 72-hour hold. However, there are only 3 hospitals in the county that deal with mental health issues, and of those 3 hospitals, there are less than half a dozen beds for adults, and for juveniles, it's 1. So, the average that these folks are staying in the hospital is about 11 hours, 11 of that 72. Basically, they're in there long enough to either get medicated or answer the questions correctly of the psychiatrist that's talking to them. They establish a baseline of being able to care for themselves, and then they release them. There are a few places that we can put these folks, but again, it's on a voluntary basis. So, how do you get someone who's mentally ill, voices in their head? They can't really discern right from wrong. They are suffering from an illness. We can't really fault them for what's going on in their head. So try to get that person to voluntarily go to a place where they're going to have to stay and follow rules and self-medicate. A lot of these folks, once they take the medication long enough and they feel some sense of normalcy, they stop the medication thinking that they're fine, and then they're back out. So Orange County Mental Health has a ways to go. But again, the city and the police department are looking for strategies to try to work with Orange County Mental Health to balance this out. And one of those happened a couple years ago where Orange County gave us one of their mental health clinicians, who was fantastic. She's about 70 years old. She dyes her hair maroon. Very soft-spoken, short lady, but my God, if you don't know what day of the week it is, she'll put you in a hospital. So fortunately, she's very aggressive, and if anybody, if it appears that they need help, she'll put them on a hold. But unfortunately, the hospitals don't have the resources to hang on to these folks as long as they should.
One of the things that maybe some of the people here don't know about is that we have one of the most suspect situations here in Anaheim, and many of them may think it's just a nice apartment complex, and that's kind of big traffic over on Wilshire.
Right.
If you go to over to Walmart, that services strictly people with mental illnesses that are housed there, and it's all inclusive. They have services, they have a whole lot of support for those people, which is the key to what
Right.
we're talking about, is support. And the issue is we need hundreds of those things
Right.
in our community.
But you make a good point, is, once we get one of those folks into one of these houses or facilities, and we stabilize them, and they voluntarily stay, that house is only so big. Once it's filled, I mean, these places. There's another place, Jamboree. It's opening up. It's not even. The foundation isn't even laid yet. But the 15 spots that they had for those situations they're already filled. I
What
mean,
we need is community support to elected officials to put those kinds of things in their community, because they're not that big in the community. I think anybody who knows about that line of project doesn't realize that's what happening. So those are kinds of things we need in our community.
right, and having that good neighbor policy is a good thing, but also remembering, keeping in mind that we should talk to law enforcement about the challenges that they're going to have with these places in the city, and how we can address those. That's one good thing that the county did about the multi-resource centers. They opened it up to questions for the law enforcement agencies that will be affected by it. Orange, Santa Ana, Fullerton, Anaheim, and they asked for concerns, and we gave them a list. And they came back with a 160-page response to all those questions. And it sounds like those responses satisfy the law enforcement agencies in their management plan. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that it's managed well.
I remember my other question. So after the centers open and you talk about all the situations progressing and moving them along, so what happens to the population that's non-cooperative, that does not want to go anywhere and they want to live the way they do off the grid?
Homelessness is not a crime. If you want to live that lifestyle, camping 24/7, go for it. But just like you and I, when we get driver's licenses, we can't just speed and run red lights. We're going to get tickets. The same thing applies to the homeless population. If they're going to engage in delinquent and nuisance crimes, the enforcement is going to be there. But we can't scoop up these folks and just send them to Catalina. That's kidnapping. So we can't do that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question just about other than
The majority are minor infraction, misdemeanor offenses, trespassing, alcohol violations, these types of things. In my experience, they're usually passive. And now, mind you, the police department don't get called about all the homeless people. We usually only get called about those that are causing a problem. So one of the things that we do is put out our feelers for those folks that are behaving themselves, that are just trying to get by. And we want to find those folks too. Usually they're easier to help off the street than the ones that we get called about. So usually the crimes, I gotta throw this out there because y'all should know, Proposition 47, to release the overcrowding and expenses in our county and state prisons, they reduced the severity of certain crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, and they released a bunch of people onto the street well before their sentences were up. The problem there was a lot of these folks there was no reintegration program. So, what's your name? Tiffany. Tiffany committed armed robbery. She was, well, no, that's violent. Let's go drugs. Let's do drugs, right? She got drugs, she got arrested for drugs. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Prop 47 came around, says non-violent offense, you're out. Without asking Tiffany what her plan was, or how can we help you, because she's expecting to be in jail for another 2 years. She's essentially housed, fed, medically provided for, but we kick her out. Well, and that's what we were faced with Prop 47 was not so much people like Tiffany, but those that prefer the criminal lifestyle. They've integrated themselves into the homeless population. So you might, it's not anymore, the 50-year-old bearded guy who's just trying to get by. We have a lot of people that were convicted for felonies and other things that are amongst them, and that doesn't help. So, and then we're also seeing a bunch of younger folks too. Unfortunately, they get hooked on heroin, and it takes hold of you, and it doesn't let go. And these younger kids, they have family that want to help them, but they prefer the drugs.
What is the percentage you think of people that prefer to be out of jail, not inside?
I used to have a number for you, and I would give you a number, but now I'm not so sure, because we ventured into the riverbed, and don't get me started. So we ventured into the riverbed, and we met a guy, Mr. Motley. Mr. Motley is 60-something years old. He's supposed to be receiving Social Security. He had no idea. So CityNet went down there. They helped him fill out the application. I picked him up, drove him to Social Security over here at Harbor, filled out his application. 2 weeks later, he's getting a $900 check to the PD every month. I think it's every month. He's getting a check now for his Social Security that he should have been getting for a couple years. And we drive down there, we deliver it to him, and he's in the process of getting out of there. Those guys that were, committed to living in the riverbed homeless for the rest of their life, they're seeing us do this, And one guy told me, friendliest guy on the planet. If I weren't in uniform, I'd have brought a six-pack and we would have had a nice night. The nicest guy. He'll talk your ear off. He's got like some southern accent. Nice guy. But a little mental health thing going on. But he saw us do this. Now he's throwing his hands up. Wait, I want to do that. So you asked me that question. Honestly, you never know what they're going to decide to do once they see that. And that's what we did at La Palma Park a lot. Is whenever we would go to pick someone up to relocate them with family or get them into a program, I made sure we picked them up in a marked unit. I made sure all the homeless folks up there saw us in uniform, and they saw us do this. I wanted it to be a spectacle because I wanted them to know that we were there for them, and this could happen to you. Sounds like a zombie PCS doctor or something, but and it worked. And those that would otherwise have decided to stay there,
that number will shrink then as they see other people getting the benefits that they should.
they're walking into the front lobby of the police department. I mean, you got to imagine the courage that takes. What's your name? Jack. Jack's been arrested by the police. He uses drugs. He's dirty. He's smelly. All of his interactions with the police in the past have probably been negative. But Jack sees what we're doing. He's decided for himself he wants to get off the street. Jack walks into the front counter of the police department. The cadets up there call me. In the 15-20 minutes it takes me to get there, Jack gets spooked out and leaves because he's afraid some cop's going to walk out and put him in handcuffs. And I asked Jack, why? Why? You haven't done? Because that's what cops do. They put handcuffs on me and I go to jail. We had to go hunt him down at the Armory in Fullerton one night, and we sent him on a bus the next morning. He's with his family in Tennessee or something. But, crying in tears that it was actually happening. So, you got to imagine the courage that it takes for these folks that have a negative history with the police, the courage it takes for them to walk up to us and say, I'm ready. But they have to know that we're there for that. Sure.
I want to commend you guys.
Your last question, okay?
Okay, I want to commend you guys. I work right across the street on Carl Carter Way, and I've seen the difference. So props to you guys. Thank you.
No, well, it's changed. It's working. So,
Thank you, Officer Cox. I've been practicing all day, so. Anyway, thank you so much for coming and doing your job, and it is working.